Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Health Tech and Med Track for this morning. I hope everyone is well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first panel. Obviously, remember to put questions into the Q&A function. We very much hope that everyone will be interactive as possible with this particular discussion. Our panel this morning is Yielding Dividends from Europe's Digital Health Scene. We have a jam-packed speaker faculty for you in this particular panel. So I'm going to hand you over to the moderator, David, the investment partner at MTIP. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks for introducing me, and welcome everyone. Welcome to this keynote panel. I would like to introduce first all the panelists here. I'm very glad we have such a high-profile group of people together here, real thought leaders in the investment and venture capital scene for health tech in Europe. So first, to the ladies, we have Katrin Geyskens, who is partner at Capricorn Partners. Then we also have Inga Deakin, principal at Draper Esprit. Heather Roxborough is partner at Optum Ventures. Then there is Christian Weiss, managing partner at Heal Capital. And finally, there's also Michael Niddam, who is co-founder at Camet Ventures. And with this group of people, I would like to start a vivid discussion. The topic of today is about, what is the state of health tech in Europe right now, and what are the investment opportunities. We see that the technology is converging together with healthcare all around the world. US market still grabs a big share of the headlines in health tech, but the European health tech startup scene is booming as well, with European innovation already materially creating cost savings, improving patient outcomes, and in many cases also approaching true return on investment. So we see from digital therapeutics, clinical tools, and R&D transformation to telehealth and connected consumer health products that European innovation is really gaining massive traction and attracting major investments. Forward-looking European digital health investors discuss the segment of the digital health ecosystem with the most promise. And I would like to open actually the panel with some questions regarding, I think that's classical, looking backwards to the last year. We had the impact of COVID, obviously, and I would like to ask some panelists what they think about the impact of COVID and which trends emerge from that impact. Let me maybe first give the word to anyone who would like to reply to this one.
I'd be happy to start.
Thank you.
So, thinking about COVID, I think there's probably 3 or 4 things that come to mind. We've all been affected by access to care, and we think about that from the level of intensive care beds through to surgeries being cancelled, and then the knock-on to primary care and long-term conditions. So that has really highlighted something that we all knew already, which is accessing the right care at the right time is so important. But I hope that with COVID, we have a kind of collective empathy and compassion to realize that accessing the right care is not just about getting the right gene mutations, getting the right drug in a very sort of niche oncology example, which is important, but there's big sort of social and behavioral health and long-term conditions where a huge number of patients struggle with access to care and where technology can really help. So I think that kind of the global trend of access is something that we've been talking about for a while, but it's really been brought to the fore across all levels of healthcare. And then obviously we talked about how tech can help with that and how we're all online now, even in this conference. So both from the patients and the healthcare providers of all different types. And there's a sense, I think, in all workplaces, but particularly in health tech, of where it feels like it can't go back to exactly how it was before. So what are the things that are going to stay, and what have we got used to now that actually is quite convenient? Maybe it's getting our medicines delivered or having an online consultation without driving to the clinic. And I feel like some of these things are not going to just immediately go back to how they were. So I think that's an important trend. And then another kind of slightly optimistic bit would be that general increased level of health literacy. So we're talking about PCR, which I don't think anyone did in the news before. So hopefully there's this awareness of diagnostics and public health and maybe statistics if we're super optimistic, but you know, that kind of public discussion about healthcare in the broadest sense is got to be a positive thing. But then maybe just to finish on a less of a positive note, but obviously there are going to be repercussions here. People have not accessed care. We've got a backlog of patients. There's a lot of, you know, work that needs to be done to recover, both on the healthcare sector and financially. So another thing that we've talked about for ages, which is improving efficiency and you know, outcomes focused value-based care, has got to be even more important as the kind of global economies recover from this period. I'll be interested in what the panel thinks about that, but those are the sort of top level thoughts that I was thinking about impact.
Thank you, Inga. Is there anyone else who wants to react on this one?
Yeah, I'm very happy to say a few words if that's okay for everyone. I must say I very much agree with the big I think title Inga put forward. I also think there is on the basis of digital health, there is a lot of pressure for institutions to start to use solutions that have been around and have, you know, didn't really were used before COVID quite extensively, and people will immediately think of telemedicine or, you know, remote consultations, but you could think of a much broader set of solutions that are now being adopted and used. I think it's a great opportunity to show the efficacy of those solutions, but it's also a big risk, I believe, for the survival of those solutions in the long term, because they are now being used in a rushed fashion with less control and not at the full capacity that they can deliver to the healthcare, because the integration of the solution in the past has been limited by quite some conservatism. And I think but this situation with COVID is at the same time a great opportunity for those solutions to prove that they can work, but also if they are not managed well in their deployment, a big threat that they are, after the COVID crisis, trashed while they could have had a very positive impact being used better.
Okay, so I think one question we could, you know, like use as a follow-up question is, having these technologies more or less already available, what are the challenges in Europe to commercialize these digital health technologies and make them really commercial success? Is that something, maybe Katrin, could you take this one?
Yeah, maybe also building further on what has been said. So when we look at it also from the perspective of our portfolio companies, I think COVID also has proven that many of our teams are extremely resilient and extremely flexible. And I think just as an example, and Heather will know the company, one of our companies, Icometrics, actually in a few months' time, they really turned around their technology, which they use actually for the analysis of brain scans. They really turned it around into a product for the triage of suspected COVID patients. So actually for lung scans, which was really amazing, because also in a heartbeat, they got actually FDA approval. But yeah, as also was said before, it all went so fast that of course now the question is, will they go further on that path or go back to purely to the brain scans? Also, of course, the let's say the accelerated approval, yeah, that doesn't mean that they just can kind of industrialize and commercialize the product further in the long run. But so we've seen, I think, much flexibility, resilience. On the other hand, where some of the companies, and then especially in this field and on the telemonitoring and telemedicine side, got real tailwinds. I mean, also some of the companies really, especially when they are still in the startup phase, really got big disadvantages by COVID, because of course we see that hospitals and providers, actually everything which is not urgent and not COVID related often has been delayed until things clear up. So I mean, we've seen many good things, but also things that actually are now hindering the planned commercialization of rather early stage companies, there, just to maybe start a discussion, is what we still see mostly in Europe is that people try to really become get traction in their home market, then often towards the neighboring countries, whether it's for out of Belgium, it's usually Benelux and France. Then you have, of course, kind of the DAC related countries. But then, and at least that's our perspective. We always want companies that have kind of a global vision on the digital healthcare side. So then usually the big jump to the US is kind of the next way to go. And I heard you asking about the way to accelerate commercialization. I think often it still is a little bit trial of error, often by using partnerships, by using the strength of global medical advisory boards. But I think most of the companies at present have not yet kind of found the step-by-step process, which will definitely lead to success. So also happy to hear the thoughts of my colleagues.
Yeah. I would like to hand over maybe to Heather, because you're working for Optum Ventures, which is a US-based fund. And so how does a US-based fund look at European companies who want to break into your home market, which is the US?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And it is a real big challenge. You've got to think for health tech companies in Europe to think about moving to the US. It's a big challenge operationally. Without a doubt. So trying to think about building out a new leadership team on the US footprint, that is tough from sitting in a different country, a different language. I think the biggest challenge tends to be understanding how to translate your value proposition. So something that works or fits very well, say in the Belgian or the UK ecosystem, doesn't necessarily translate across to the US. So what we find actually is we spend a lot of time with companies to help them understand the value proposition in the US market and who would pay for it, why, some of the price and financial incentives and sensitivities, to try to understand, is their business model translatable, and does that international expansion make sense? In some cases, it definitely does, and we can help turbocharge that. But to be honest, in some cases, it doesn't. It happens to be that the entrepreneurs have developed a really good product for their home market, and they can take all that market share in their home market, but it's less of a global opportunity. It's more of a local one. So I think that's the key part, to go through that process and to understand that before you actually put some dollars behind, thinking about building out operations in the US or other countries.
Okay. Thanks, Heather. And maybe I would like to go now with a follow-up question towards Christian. Christian, you work mainly from the German market, and I was wondering, for companies, health tech startups, health tech scale-ups that want to expand internationally with a small home market like Benelux countries or Israel, they think maybe faster to go towards bigger countries like US or Canada. How do you look at German, for instance, health tech startups that have already a quite sizable home market? Do you think it's always also still interesting for them to immediately develop that international go-to-market strategy? Or should they, with the favorable legislation you have right now in Germany, first try to be successful and have a good product market fit in Germany?
Thanks, David. Happy to comment here from my side. And I think, as always, it depends, right? So I guess the German market is probably one of the most dynamic markets at the moment for health tech, given the regulatory changes. It is a very sizable market, but there's also still quite a lot of uncertainty how exactly that will unravel and how it exactly will develop, and whether it will be sufficient as a own dedicated market. Nevertheless, when we talk to founders and teams, it's probably always about the international vision, right? And you can argue and debate whether it's going to be a European champion or a US champion, and it has so many different implications and challenges, product-wise, regulatory-wise, also as Heather depicted it. But from my point of view, key growth into international markets sooner or later is a prerequisite, although probably not something to start with, right? I guess it's always, you're always well advise to start somewhere, somehow, and if that works well, see how this goes and rolls on. But I guess it's still also a big fallacy. I mean, you've seen the model from many companies in the Nordics, then expanding into the German or DACH region, which often work. But also I have heard a lot of founders what Heather kind of said for the US, like, yeah, we just took the product and then we rolled it out to Germany or any other market, and it turns out like, yeah, it doesn't work this way. We need to adapt and we need to think about it a bit differently. And that challenge still remains in the healthcare market. It's a bit different, I guess, for other pieces, but that's also what makes this exciting. And if you crack it and if you nail it, that's even more worth a while. Yeah?
Okay. So we've witnessed actually that there is in health tech funding, early stage funding is rather on a low in the last year, and later stage funding, scale up funding is on a high in terms of absolute numbers and numbers of deals. How do you look at that? Is that a sign that the market is maturing, or is there also a danger that we dry up with a lack of additional new innovations into the market?
Happy to also comment here from my side first, and then looking forward to your views. But from my point of view, it's advantages or strength and weakness at the same time. So from an early stage investor perspective, of course, it's great that you have these follow-on opportunities and capabilities, even if it's probably as often a bit US skewed. But then again, to me, it feels this is somewhat changing, but it is a little bit of the issue that the risk taking and the innovation depth in the early stage market can still grow and is growing, but also still needs to grow. Yeah. So I have the feeling more and more funds and investors are looking now post-COVID into that space. So that's great. But compared to other areas, it's probably still not enough if you realize and start to realize how much money can cost to scale these companies and how much more resources it might need than when you're comparing to, I don't know, the standard B2B SaaS software. It just takes more time, it takes more money, that is still yet to be acknowledged and to be adjusted here in terms of funding.
If I may, if I may just add one word on that, I think this issue about what's the appropriate level of financing, how to assess risk in early stage companies in our space of health tech is one that's not very well understood by the broader investment community. Very often we see companies, because they have a medical element to their model that's been pushed back by VCs that are more minded towards, I would say, SaaS or technology startups. The reality is pure tech in health tech. Well, sometimes it can work, but in many, many instances, if it's not really embedded into the clinical processes, it is limited in its way in its ability to expand globally. And which means that there is more cost earlier on to de-risk the model. And there is no way, in my opinion, to find a shortcut into that and to hope that the companies will succeed with the same kind of limited investment in the early phase. So it's really in the middle between biotech and SaaS, and it requires a different kind of mindset when we invest, a different kind of mindset when we assess the models. And this is something I can see companies, because I have a lot of early stage health tech companies that are really struggling when they go for their first round post-seed, because the kind of metrics that they present cannot be the same as SaaS. And of course, they are not a biotech, so it's not a huge ticket of research. And this is a real challenge, I think, for the financing industry.
Yeah, if I can go further on that. So I fully agree with Christian and Michael. I think also what we have seen, because we tend to try to invest quite early stage, is that given given that healthcare, and especially digital healthcare now, is a very hot topic, so it attracts lots of attention. But what we see on the early stage side, so it's very, I mean, it's lots and lots of deal flow, but now you start seeing that there are more and more, let's say that we see this kind of a little bit of Me Too companies, that somehow people have access to a data set, they have written a very good algorithm, and purely based on that, they think they can now build with, yeah, as Michael just said, with minimal funds, a very large and successful company, while there is already often a whole ecosystem of competition, which is very well funded. So, I mean, it's not to kind of not to put off entrepreneurs and people that want to get into the market, but yeah, there's already lots and lots of things out there, and we see it's growing quite slowly if you look at market traction. So there, I think in a way, it's kind of it's logical that often VCs wants to put more money in startups and in companies that have already proven and have already some validation, than into the 10th company, which is trying to do the same what others started 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Katrin. And a question I have is for all of you, do you think that European entrepreneurs in health tech have sufficient global vision and sufficient global ambition from the onset? I mean, what we see sometimes is that some entrepreneurs are actually happy to do 2 funding rounds and then already aim towards an exit. For them, maybe some millions of exit money is very nice to have, and they can build further in their career. While we might want to see more people, let's say, that have this strong determination to build a unicorn and to say, I'm going to build a unicorn out of Europe. What do you think? Is there enough of this spirit, or should it be more?
I wonder if it's a function of, oh, sorry, Heather. I wonder if it's a function of maturity of the market. So I kind of have sympathy for people that want to just cash out. And then the next venture, it's not about their buying their next house. It's about building something really massive. So, and I think that as the industry will evolve, hopefully we'll have more of those people that are comfortable now and not doing it for the personal gain, and actually building something much, much bigger. And I think that speaks to your previous question as well about scaling and later stage fundraising. I'm pretty optimistic about that, because I feel like we need to build some bigger companies that can acquire these little point solution companies that Katrin talked about, where, you know, they are the scaling platform on which you add these other products. So if we think about how pharma companies develop, you know, they buy in lots of their new technologies and use their platform to distribute them and scale. So I'm pretty excited now that I see on pitch decks that companies are considering telehealth. Teledoc is always kind of in there as a potential acquirer now, and it was previously only or I don't know, maybe a pharma company or buyers, or maybe like a tech company or something. So maybe we're going to see now a new niche of big health tech companies that in themselves are acquirers and can enable scaling. So I hope that with time, the people, the entrepreneurs, as you mentioned, will be more sort of ambitious to do that. It will become more possible. There'll be more models to follow. It might be quite a lot of consolidation and acquisition and growth, which requires a slightly different mindset. But I hope that will happen. I wonder what the panel thinks. Is there space for more big health tech unicorns, or will it have to fit with pharma or healthcare provision?
Inga, let me go on this. And yeah, I hope so. I mean, we're a exclusively health tech focused European fund. Yeah. So we better are convinced that yes, there's these opportunities, and yes, there's the founders. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's a function of market maturity on the one hand, but on the other hand, also maybe more and more teams are getting that spirit from my point of view. So at the moment, I have the feeling there's a lot of companies looking at very interesting vertically integrated solution, which is apparently one way to go. And the next thing is about, well, eventually it's the platform wars again, right? So we have seen that in a couple of industries, and I'm really looking forward to see who's building these health tech platform wars. Is it again Amazon? Is it Google? Is it any one of these guys? Hopefully it's someone from Europe actually building these. And I mean, Dr. Lip is becoming an interesting platform here from the French market. And from my point of view, this position, the leading healthcare platform, is yet up to take and up for grabs. And let's see who builds it. And we definitely have seen teams who have the vision and to have the ambition to do that. I think they can get the funding, particularly in these Zoom world times. That seems to be somewhat easier if you look across geographies than ever before. So I guess that's the way to go. Let's go and build these platforms here.
Well, that will require obviously lots of funding from our side, and also, you know, once the companies reach valuations of, I would say, more than 100, 200 million euro, you need then bigger funding rounds, and the question will be if the pockets of the European investors are still deep enough to also follow on there in those rounds. So I really hope the ecosystem will, you know, mature further, that there is further consolidation, and that we also have a Teladoc, Livongo style like companies in our European ecosystem that can do wrap-ups from Europe, and not only that we, you know, mature the technology and then sell it to the other side of the Atlantic. So that's really interesting. I have maybe some questions already received from the audience. Heather, how does the US market differ from European markets in regards to a digital product? And I think mainly in our space, we have in health tech, we have regulated products and unregulated products. There are softwares that need software as a medical device, need a regulation, FDA stamp, others don't at all. How do you look at that? Is there a difference between European market and US market?
I don't think there is in terms of regulatory. I think that the difference tends to be in how the product is used and who pays for it. And the business model. So we see that that's where the main differences are. And you know, in terms of the tech, normally the tech is similar, and it's the same integration challenges in the US as what they are in Europe. And so if you are a German company and have you know, got through your EHR integration challenges, you can probably do the same quite easily in the US. The same with the data privacy regulation challenges. As I say, that the biggest tends to be understanding who's going to pay for it and making sure that product is adapted for that. And then actually having the right outcome data that can facilitate a sale. So, you know, sometimes the outcome data and the ROI that a European insurer or, you know, the NHS would look for is very different to what a health plan or a health system in the US would. And the biggest challenge for these companies tends to be how to get that data and have a compelling sales proposition for the US marketplace.
Okay, maybe another question I received here that is quite interesting, I think, especially for the entrepreneurs in our audience, is for companies, for startups who are currently fundraising, what's the best way to get our attention as investors and begin a dialogue, a conversation with us as investors? What would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think it's no rocket science. Drop us an email or go via LinkedIn or whatever with a short description, an executive summary. I mean, the clearer it is, the better. And then start building a relationship. Don't get, don't get sad if we don't reply within 3 days, because we're kind of, I think, overwhelmed with messages. But at least from Capricorn, we will get back to you. And we'll be always interested in having a quick look, maybe not for now, but maybe for in half a year, maybe for next year, maybe for in 2 years. I think what we typically don't like is like, okay, you have everything is set, it's a pitch and you want to close in 2 months. That usually doesn't work. I mean, it's not impossible, but we like to invest in teams where we have been in touch often for half a year to more than 1 year, where we have taken the time to get to know the people. And there's never a bad time to get in touch with us, and the earlier the better.
Okay.
At one point, I think there's a misconception that you have to have an introduction and like everyone knows each other, so you have to get a link in. I'm quite excited when I get an email from someone that is not connected to anyone at all, because it's a new part of the network. So, you know, don't feel that you have to always have that introduction. I mean, it helps to be validated, and you know, but just try it, reach out.
Yeah, cold calling also works sometimes, indeed. So I wanted to go back to the technology a little bit. next to the fact that we, in the most of the pitch decks, at least those that we receive, we see one slide covering COVID-19 and what kind of solution the company developed for COVID-19. I think Katrin was referring to icometrics, but their solution that they, and like, you know, the turnaround they did, that was really valuable. I see also a lot of slide decks where I think, you know, the company is really trying to offer something that is not really helping the market, that is not a real valuable solution. On the other hand, we also see a lot of slides in any deck on artificial intelligence. Any company says or claims that they have something to do with big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning. I would like to hear from you guys. How do you look at that? How do you assess basically if there is really a thorough artificial intelligence component to their solution or not? Because yeah, you can claim it easily, but how do you check that?
Maybe I can take that. I think from our perspective, the tech's really important, but what's more important is understanding the product market fit. So what does that tech actually enable? And then the first question for us is, you know, what is that unique product? How does it impact the market? Is it clinical efficiencies? What's the value behind it? And then once we get comfortable with the overall business opportunity, then you can take a bit of tech DD on, you know, how proprietary or how unique is the underpinning platform. But you know, for us, it's not about investing in the tech; it's about the product and the market opportunity. And I think entrepreneurs sometimes, you know, forget that. They get very excited about their latest tech development, and you know, and it is very important. But I think you just can't forget the importance of that product market fit and what the market opportunity is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I can confirm that. Of course, our main investment thesis is that we invest in data-driven companies that play a role in the value chain of turning data to information, to insights, and then finally to actionable insights. So for us, it's very important. But I think, yeah, we don't invest, as Heather said, kind of in nice technology, but of course, these actionable insights, how do you get them to the final client, and how do you, in what business or pricing model do you get, do you get value out of it? I think it's often very clear from the start if it's kind of really embedded in the team's mindset, or whether they kind of put this data science sauce on top of kind of traditional medtech just to up the valuation or to up the interest. So it's also the technology per se. Yeah, I said I don't care too much whether it's deep learning or a simple algorithm or whatever, but it needs to fit into the value offering to the final client.
Okay.
I'd be interested in the panel's view on the that direction of travel, because the impression that maybe wrongly is that some of these tools are going to end up being quite commoditized. So actually those companies that have the access to the data, you know, it used to be really hard to make a website. Now it's not that hard. So is it, maybe that's still quite a long way away, but I always question whether really it's the algorithm or whether it's the data that's powering that's the long-term value driver.
Okay, thanks, Inga. Another topic that also has been discussed often in conferences is the rise of digital therapeutics. And there have been many promises on digital therapeutics. I think we see some standalone digital therapeutics arriving finally into the market, both on both sides of the Atlantic. My question is, you know, how do you look at them? We see, I mean, personally, I see that pharma companies who have digital health departments are also interested in developing combination products, so on a drug and a digital counterpart on the other side. Do you think digital therapeutics are really going in front of a breakthrough on the one hand? And how about reimbursement, both in Europe, for instance, in Germany, but also in the US, because I think reimbursement is very important for digital therapeutics. So who wants to take some views there? No one wants to speak on digital therapeutics?
No, happy to jump in here, David. And I guess particularly for the German market, it's a interesting topic, right? Because there is this Digital Care Act and the DVG offering the opportunity for essentially DTX or apps to be reimbursed right away. A little bit comparable to the breakthrough FDA designation in the US with getting an immediate reimbursement code, which is quite cool. Having said that, I guess the overall question, whether it's DTX or companion apps with farmers, it still remains to be seen how this develops, right? You have the Pear Therapeutics and you have the Click Therapeutics who essentially built very cool biotech companies who happen to code their drugs. The question is like the smaller brothers and sisters which are running around here now with vertically focused single treatment areas, products and companies. How will this develop? And we are also wondering like how sustainable is that, right? If you build the next MSK app, which is very good, they may be proven to be helpful for back pain or for losing weight, that is great. But then again, there are so many others who might do that very similarly in comparable ways. And probably you would need to work on also, thinking about product differentiations and so on and so forth. Because if you look, for example, in the German discussion, there is these initial DTX with quite significant prices and a couple of €100 ranges, whether you then can argue, well, if you look into the just app store and look at apps which might or might do similar things, it's just $50 a year, yeah. And so how sustainable is that, and how will you be able to expand and to work on this position? Long story short, I think DTX are here to stay, but we are yet to see the final shape and form of these thingies, how they will actually look like eventually in their final way of being.
It looks like that they have to prove performance, maybe in clinical trials, benchmarked to the gold standard or the guidelines. I think that is maybe a key for the DTX to be reimbursed or to be successful in the market. Heather, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just, I think there's a question about whether the reimbursement path is the right path or the optimal path. I think for some it is, and we saw paratherapeutics going down that path. But for others, there are different ways to think about the business model outside of reimbursement that actually I think underpins a big business opportunity. I think a good example of that is Kaya Health in our portfolio. So Kaya is a digital MSK therapy, and there Kaya actually sells directly to US employers. It has an employer-facing model, and there, you don't have to think about the reimbursement path and CPT codes and getting on the digital formularies. It's actually all about selling your proposition and the total cost savings to employers. And we're seeing quite a few companies also in the behavioral health space adopting exactly the same approach, and that I think is where a lot of these companies are getting quite significant traction. So I think it's different ways to think about business models.
Yeah.
So does the panel think that employer model would only work in the US, or is that something that we could scale in Europe?
No, it works in Europe. So we're seeing, actually seeing some really interesting early stage companies taking exactly the same model, the learnings from the US, which is really interesting, and applying it into the UK and European markets and getting some good traction. So I think that model does flip across and we can learn from that.
Cool.
Good. I think we have like around 5 to 7 minutes left. I would like to touch on another topic, which is definitely of interest to us as investors. It's how the valuations of health tech companies are currently in Europe. And if we compare this with the US market, what are the trends in valuation? Do you think they are still reasonable, or are we seeing some signs of overheating in the market as well? Yeah, I think we can start with that. Who would like to share his experience on valuations?
Okay, I'll go first. I think, well, there's, as always, there are two sides to the coin. I'm always a bit hesitant to use the words hype or overheated because, I mean, yeah, we are still in the business. We will do new investments and we are also looking at exits. So, I mean, honestly, sometimes I see very, very crazy valuation expectations, especially on the early side, where I think like, yes, this is just not, I mean, whatever way I think about it, I cannot do the math then to turn that into next rounds and into a successful exit in a number of years. So yeah, if you are more on the, I mean, if you have already are in a company where you want to set up a follow-on round and where the company has already traction and proof points, then it's probably good to be in it, also from potentially an exit and real growth perspective. So it's difficult. I would say, yeah, especially to the early stage entrepreneur, yeah, maybe think about not yet raising 15 million, but think about 5 and scaling down a bit of your expectations, and then make sure you get there and you get to the next valuation point. Or otherwise, yeah, make sure that you have really enough money and that you just deliver on your promises, because otherwise it might be a problem in 2 years from now or in 12 months when the initial money you raised now at very high valuations is all invested and gone. I'm also a bit afraid, because I don't like complicated term sheets and complicated terms and conditions, but I'm afraid if we see the current trend, which is with increasing valuations going on, yeah, we will, just to kind of counterbalance that, we might become also to see very complicated, I don't know, preference structures and so on, which I think usually in the longer term are not good, not for the entrepreneurs, but also not for the VCs. So I'm still very optimistic, and I think raising valuations is good for the whole industry, but we just need to see it's not getting kind of out of reason.
Out of control, yes, indeed. And I think we all have a responsibility there as investors to not accept those too high pre-money valuations. But is there anyone else who has a feedback on this in the market? What's the market feeling on valuations? No?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you want to look at pessimistically, you can say, well, the very good venture funds returns 3x, right? And for sure, the valuations over the last years have increased 3x. So you could do the math where the funds will end up. On the other hand, I'm much more on the positive side here and say it's a much more dynamic market. There's much more money in the market at all stages. And there is also eventually much more value being created. Yeah. So yes, particularly in the European angle, the exit market still has to follow through and show same sort of exits in the space. But I guess that what we have seen in other industries, and where I'm also convinced what we will see in the health tech space, and we have started to see first signs there with significant companies being built, being exited. Look at Livongo and the like. So I think, yes, the market has heated up quite a bit. That's definitely the way, but that's the way it is. And also we have to work with that. So I'm not calling the top here in that sense. I think we will see much more dynamic field, rightly so. And I'm also convinced that we'll see the according exits needed to justify these valuations. Nevertheless, yes, there is some crazy stuff going on from time to time.
Just maybe towards the exit and to finish off this conversation, you know, traditionally we see more strategics wrapping up companies in the health tech space, but there is also IPOs and the big trend of last year in the US, the SPACs. So is there anyone who feels that the climate is favorable for IPOs and maybe SPAC transactions in the health tech market currently?
I think it definitely is favorable. The question is for how long. So SVB talked about 15 to 20 companies going public, health tech companies going to go public this year. And when I see some of the dynamics in the US, you can certainly recognize that. We're also seeing some news being reported that a number of SPACs in the US are being raised solely with the intent to pull and take public European health tech companies.
Yes.
And so I think that trend looks to reach through into Europe. I think it's great because it offers exit opportunities for some of these companies where before, actually, to be honest, the exit path for health tech companies was largely unclear. If you think about for biotech or for tech, there's a very well-trodden path there. And I think for health tech, we're feeling our way around potential acquirers and what the exit opportunities could be. And I think the market has really matured in that regard over the past 12 months. We now see IPOs and SPACs as exit opportunities. And then the creation, as Inga said, of some very substantial now public companies who were looking to acquire smaller assets. And so a whole new batch of acquirers has appeared in the market. So I think it's very favorable, but unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not sure how long it's going to last for. So I think that's the key question.
Yeah, let's maybe seize the opportunity as the market's hot right now. Yeah. So I fear that is all what we have time for right now. I think we touched upon many different topics that are interesting for our health tech market. We see that our market is thriving, and I would like to thank you very warmly for your contributions. They are very valuable, and I would give back the word to Becky, maybe.
Thank you so much, David. And just to reiterate, obviously, what's already been said, thank you so much to all the panelists for their input, and David for obviously moderating the discussion. As always, 45 minutes is never enough, but hopefully it's given everyone a flavour of these sort of, discussion and topics going into 2021. Once again, I encourage everyone to reach out to the panelists and all of the attendees, on the platform and make those connections and obviously carry on those discussions. In the meantime, our next session is moving on to the BD discussion, and our medtech's movers and shakers ready to resume. So I will see you back here shortly for that session. In the meantime, take a break, enjoy, and we'll see you shortly.